Tang tang namassami harisavanam patavim pabhasam tayan jaguntavi hare udivasam yim brahmena vedagu sambudhame te me namo te chamam bhadayantu namantu buddhanam namantu bodhiyam namo vibuddhanam namo vibuddhanam.
So the first sutta I'm going to be reading from, this is Majjhima Nikaya 143. Anathapindiko Vada Sutta. Advice to Anathapindika. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now on that occasion, the householder, Anathapindika, was afflicted, suffering and gravely ill. Then he addressed a certain man thus, "Come, good man, go to the Blessed One, pay homage in my name with your head at his feet and say, Venerable Sir, the householder Anathapindika is afflicted, suffering and gravely ill." He pays homage to his head at the Blessed One's feet. Then go to the Venerable Sariputta, pay homage in my name with your head at his feet and say, Venerable Sir, the householder Anathapindika is afflicted, suffering and gravely ill. He pays homage with his head at the Venerable Sariputta's feet. Then say, it would be good, Venerable Sir, if the Venerable Sariputta would come to the residence of the householder Anathapindika out of compassion. Yes, sir, the man replied, and he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to the Blessed One, he sat down at one side and delivered his message. Then he went to the Venerable Sariputta, and after paying homage to the Venerable Sariputta, he delivered his message, saying, It would be good, Venerable Sir, if the Venerable Sariputta would come to the residence of the householder Anathapindika out of compassion. The Venerable Sariputta consented in silence. Then the Venerable Sariputta dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, went to the residence of the householder Anathapindika, with the Venerable Ānanda as his attendant. Having gone there, he sat down on a seat made ready, and said to the householder Anathapindika, I hope you are getting well, householder. I hope you are comfortable. I hope your painful feelings are subsiding and not increasing, and that their subsiding, not their increase, is apparent. Venerable Sariputta, I am not getting well. I am not comfortable. My painful feelings are increasing, not subsiding. Their increase and not their subsiding is apparent. Just as if a strong man were splitting my head open with a sharp sword, so too violent winds cut through my head. I am not getting well. Just as if a strong man were tightening a tough leather strap around my head as a headband, so too there are violent pains in my head. I am not getting well. Just as if a skilled butcher or his apprentice were to carve up an ox's belly with a sharp butcher's knife, so too violent winds are carving up my belly. I am not getting well. I think you recognize this. Maybe you also recognize this.
Sounds familiar.
The fan has ceased.
It's not getting better.
It is not getting well. All right. I am not getting well. Just as if two strong men were to seize a weaker man by both arms and roast him over a pit of hot coals, so too there is a violent burning in my body. I am not getting well. I am not comfortable. My painful feelings are increasing, not subsiding. Their increase and not their subsiding is apparent. Now the next passage is where Sariputta provides the instructions to Anathapindika. So my advice to you all is to close your eyes and just listen, and I will explain as we continue reading through this. We'll be guiding you through a process of unraveling your consciousness. Then, householder, you should train thus: I will not cling to the eye, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the eye. I will not cling to the ear, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the ear. I will not cling to the nose, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the nose. I will not cling to the tongue, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the tongue. I will not cling to the body, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the body. I will not cling to the mind, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the mind. These are the six sense bases: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body. They are just impersonal processes. They are part of your body, part of rupa, your form. But your consciousness, that is to say your awareness, your mind, will not be dependent upon them. In other words, the consciousness will not cling to them, will not take them as me, mine, or myself. The awareness remains just as it is, does not superimpose a sense of self in these sense organs, in these six sense bases, before these six sense bases, or after the six sense bases. The consciousness remains unperturbed, unaffected, independent of these six sense bases. Householder, you should train thus: I will not cling to forms, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon forms. I will not cling to sounds, and my consciousness will not be dependent on sounds. I will not cling to odors, and my consciousness will not be dependent on odors. I will not cling to flavors, and my consciousness will not be dependent on flavors. I will not cling to tangibles, and my consciousness will not be dependent on tangibles. I will not cling to mind objects, and my consciousness will not be dependent on mind objects. These are the external six sense bases. The internal are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. But the external are the objects of the six sense bases. Each of these is impersonal, has nothing to do with me, mine, or myself. Each of these objects have nothing to do with what is happening with the I or I consciousness. The mind remains independent of these objects. The consciousness remains independent of these objects because it does not cling to them. Forms remain form. Sounds remain sound. Odors remain odor. Tastes and flavors remain tastes and flavors. Tangibles remain tangibles. And mind objects, thoughts, ideas, concepts remain as they are. There is no you in there. There is no you after it. There is no you before it. Just the objects. I will not cling to I consciousness, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon I consciousness. I will not cling to ear consciousness, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon ear consciousness. I will not cling to nose consciousness, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon nose consciousness. I will not cling to tongue consciousness, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon tongue consciousness. I will not cling to body consciousness, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon body consciousness. I will not cling to mind consciousness, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon mind consciousness. These different consciousnesses, they arise and pass away, just as the sense bases, the internal sense bases arise and pass away, just as the external sense bases arise and pass away, so too do these sense-based consciousnesses arise and pass away, dependent upon contact. With the meeting of I and forms, there is I consciousness. The joining of these together are eye contact. The meeting of ears and sound, that is ear consciousness, gives rise to ear consciousness. The joining of these three is ear contact. The odors and nose, the joining of these gives rise to nose consciousness. And these three constitute nose contact. The flavors and tongue, when they join together, they give rise to tongue consciousness. And the joining of these three provides tongue contact. The body intangibles, when they join, they give rise to body consciousness. And these three constitute body contact. The mind and mind objects, when they make contact, they give rise to mind consciousness. And these constitute mind contact. In other words, these consciousnesses are dependent upon the sense bases, dependent upon the external sense bases. Consciousness itself is impermanent, liable to pass away, liable to change. So don't let your consciousness, your mind, cling to eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, or forms, sounds, odors, flavors, tangibles, or mind objects, or eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. When your mind remains independent of these, non-grasping, your mind remains unaffected because it sees the truth of these experiences. These are composites that give rise to an experience. But you are not the experience. You are not the experiencer. You are not the experiencing either. There is no self in the arising or passing away. There is no self in the experience. There is no self in the experiencer. There is no self in the experiencing. These are all notions, ideas arising through wrong self-view. Notice this and let go of it. I will not cling to eye contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon eye contact. I will not cling to ear contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon ear contact. I will not cling to nose contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon nose contact. I will not cling to tongue contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon tongue contact. I will not cling to body contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon body contact. I will not cling to mind contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon mind contact. We've already seen that contact is dependent upon the sixfold base, the internal sixfold base. The joining of the internal sixfold base with the external sixfold base gives rise to the sensory consciousnesses, and they constitute the different sensory contacts. In other words, they are dependently arisen. They arise dependent upon causes and conditions. That which arises dependent upon causes and conditions is liable to change, liable to disappear when those causes and conditions disappear. So how can there be a self in that? If they are liable to change, they are liable to cause suffering. So these sensory-based contacts should be seen as not me, not mine, not myself. Keep your mind independent of these experiences. Observe them, understand them as what they truly are with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not me, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. You should train thus: I will not cling to the feeling born of eye contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the feeling born of eye contact. I will not cling to feeling born of ear contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent on feeling born of ear contact. I will not cling to feeling born of nose contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent on feeling born of nose contact. I will not cling to feeling born of tongue contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent on feeling born of tongue contact. I will not cling to feeling born of body contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent on feeling born of body contact. I will not cling to feeling born of mind contact, and my consciousness will not be dependent on feeling born of mind contact. Feeling, Vedana, all felt experience dependent upon contact with the six sense bases, arises and passes away in every moment. What you see as a fluid experience is made up of trillions and trillions of arising and passing away of feeling. Where is the self in any of that? It arises dependent upon causes and conditions. That which arises dependent upon causes and conditions is liable to disappear when those causes and conditions disappear. And therefore, they should be seen as impermanent, liable to cause suffering, and therefore seen with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. All feeling is just an experience dependent upon contact. When there is no contact, there is no feeling. When there is no sixth sense base, there is no contact. I will not cling to the earth element, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon the earth element. I will not cling to the water element, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon the water element. I will not cling to the fire element, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon the fire element. I will not cling to the air element, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon the air element. I will not cling to the space element, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the space element. I will not cling to the consciousness element, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the consciousness element. These six elements, earth, fire, water, and air, and space. They constitute the body, rupa. Consciousness is a short form. The consciousness element is a short form for nama, or mind. These are the faculties for contact, feeling, perception, intention, and attention. This mind is known by its faculties. This mind is dependent upon consciousness, the awareness to arise and pass away. In every moment that mind arises and passes away, so too does the body arise and pass away. The body keeps changing, is liable to change. The body continues to decay, change, age, experience pain and pleasure. That pain and pleasure is dependent upon contact with the body, with the 6 sense bases, including the mind. In order for us to experience the body, we need components of the mind. And in order for that mind to be experienced, we need the body. There is that interdependency. Anything that is dependent upon another or interdependent with another is liable to change, liable to decay, and therefore should be seen with proper wisdom. Thus, it is liable to cause suffering and therefore not to be seen as me, mine, or myself. Air, fire, water, earth, space, these change. The internal earth element and the external earth element are one and the same. The internal water element and the external water element are one and the same. The internal air element and the external air element are one and the same. The internal fire element and the external fire element are one and the same. The internal space element and the external space element are one and the same. And in order for us to experience all of this, we require the consciousness element, which is the short form for the mind. But these elements, whether internal or external, change dependent upon circumstances and situations. They are liable to decay. And if the mind is dependent upon them to be experienced, then even the mind is liable to decay. So you will not cling to any of these elements, internally or externally. Neither will you cling to the mind, internally or externally. And your awareness will not be dependent upon these elements. I will not cling to material form, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon material form. I will not cling to feeling, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon feeling. I will not cling to perception, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon perception. I will not cling to formations, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon formations. I will not cling to consciousness, and my consciousness will not be dependent on consciousness. I will not cling to material form internal or external, far or near, in the past, present, or the future, subtle or gross. Any of these material forms are impermanent, liable to change, liable to cause suffering, and therefore should be seen as not me, not mine, or not myself. Seeing this, the mind becomes disenchanted with all material form. Being disenchanted, it experiences dispassion. Being dispassionate, mind is liberated from attaching a sense of self to any form. Feeling arises and passes away, dependent upon the arising and passing away of contact. Feeling continues to change. Seeing the impermanent nature of the arising and passing away of feeling, one sees with proper wisdom thus that this is liable to cause suffering, therefore should not be seen as me, mine, or myself. Seeing this, the mind becomes disenchanted with all feeling. Becoming disenchanted, it becomes dispassionate. Experiencing dispassion, mind becomes liberated. Perception. What is perception? Perception is dependent upon contact. Perception is that aspect of the mind that recognizes an experience, that labels and notes an experience. It arises in conjunction with all experience. Seeing this, the mind understands. Perception, being dependent upon contact, will pass away when that contact changes and passes away. Seeing this, the mind understands that all perception, whether internal or external, far or near, subtle or gross, of the past, present, or the future, all is liable to change, impermanent, liable to cause suffering, so should be seen with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. Seeing this, the mind sees things as they actually are. Doing this, the mind experiences disenchantment. Becoming disenchanted, the mind experiences dispassion. Becoming dispassionate, the mind is liberated. All formations are arising and passing away, dependent upon contact. When there is contact, it can give rise to a feeling. For us to experience that feeling, there is required mental formations. For us to express speech, there is required verbal formations. For us to move and inhale and exhale, there is required bodily formations. These formations arise dependent upon contact. When there is an intention, these formations arise. These formations condition all of our intentions, choices, and decisions, all of our inclinations. Even our intentions, being dependent upon past causes and conditions, dependent upon the situation, are liable to change, liable to pass away, dependent upon those causes and conditions. But since they are liable to change, liable to be inconstant, they should be seen as impermanent and liable to cause suffering. Therefore, they should be seen with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. Seeing this, you let go of all attachment of self to any decision, to any choice, to any intention, to any formation that arises. In this way, you see things as they really are, with reference to formations. Seeing this, mind becomes disenchanted with all formations. Becoming disenchanted, mind becomes dispassionate. Experiencing dispassion, mind is liberated. Consciousness, the arising and passing away of consciousnesses, dependent upon the mind and body, nama and rupa. Nama and rupa are dependent upon consciousness, and consciousness arises dependent upon nama and rupa. Consciousness arising and passing away, dependent upon its causes and conditions, continues to change. There is no such thing as a permanent, unchanging consciousness. Consciousness continues to evolve. It is impermanent, dependent upon causes and conditions. All consciousness is experienced in reference to the mind. And mind continues to change dependent upon external and internal causes and conditions. Consciousness, which is subject to change, should be seen as liable to cause suffering. Therefore, it is to be seen with proper wisdom. Thus, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. Seeing things as they really are, mind becomes disenchanted with consciousness. Becoming disenchanted, mind experiences dispassion. Becoming dispassionate, mind is liberated from all notions of self in reference to consciousness. I will not cling to the base of infinite space, and my consciousness will not be dependent upon the base of infinite space. I will not cling to the base of infinite consciousness, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the base of infinite consciousness. I will not cling to the base of nothingness, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the base of nothingness. I will not cling to the base of neither perception nor non-perception, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the base of neither perception nor non-perception. These formless attainments, infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. All of them are volitionally produced. Volitionally produced means that they are dependent upon intentions. There is an intention to radiate loving kindness or any of the Brahma-viharas, and dependent upon that, mind experiences infinite space. This is one of the gateways into infinite space. As mind becomes more calm, it experiences infinite consciousness, dependent upon the intention to enter into infinite consciousness. As the mind calms down further, it experiences nothingness. That nothingness, or the experience of nothingness, is dependent upon the intention to enter into nothingness. As mind lets go of all gross perceptions and enters the limits of perception, it experiences neither perception nor non-perception. This experience too is volitionally produced, dependent upon intentions. Anything that is dependent upon prior causes and conditions is subject to change when those causes and conditions fall away. These states of mind, these experiences, are impermanent and therefore not to be seen as me, mine, or myself. Letting go of all notions of a permanent personal self to these experiences, mind becomes disenchanted with these experiences. Becoming disenchanted, mind experiences dispassion. Becoming dispassionate, mind is liberated from these experiences. I will not cling to this world, and my consciousness will not be dependent on this world. I will not cling to the world beyond, and my consciousness will not be dependent on the world beyond. This world and the next world, the world beyond. This world can be seen in different ways. Everything that we experience through the six sense bases, that is constituted as the world. And so the experience of this world is also dependent upon causes and conditions when there is contact with the six sense bases. Seeing this, mind sees that this world is made up of composites and components which are dependent upon prior causes and conditions. Seeing this, mind understands the impermanent nature of this world. Mind lets go of any notion of happiness in this world and becomes disenchanted, seeing this process as not me, not mine, not myself. The next world, if we were to consider the next world, we would see that that too arises dependent upon causes and conditions. Because the intention, if it is rooted in craving, identification, or aversion, gives rise to a consciousness that then departs from this world and experiences the next world. That next world is experienced again through some form of the six sense bases and consciousness. That keeps changing. Because it keeps changing, even the next world is made up of interdependent and dependent causes and conditions. Seeing this, one understands that the next world too is impermanent, liable to cause suffering, and therefore should be seen with proper wisdom thus. This is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. Seeing this, one lets go of all notions of self attached to this world or to the next world. Becoming disenchanted with this world and the next world, the mind experiences dispassion. Experiencing dispassion, the mind is liberated from all notions of this world and the next world. I will not cling to what is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, encountered, sought after, and examined by the mind, and my consciousness will not be dependent on that. In other words, in the experience itself, there is only the experience and the awareness of that experience. If the awareness goes beyond and says that this experience is me, mine, or myself, that is where trouble begins. That is how dukkha arises. But if you see that in the seen there is only the seen, in the heard there is only the heard, in the cognized there is only the cognized, in the sense that there is only the sensed, And there is no you in that, there is no you before that, and there is no you after that. Just that is the end of suffering. And so mind, seeing this, becomes disenchanted with all experience, even through the experience of the mind. Becoming disenchanted, it experiences dispassion. Becoming dispassionate, it experiences liberation from all notions of this is me, this is mine, this is myself, in reference to all that is seen, all that is heard, all that is cognized, all that is sensed. When this was said, the householder Anathapindika wept and shed tears. Then the Venerable Ānanda asked him, "Are you foundering, householder? Are you sinking?" "I am not foundering, Venerable Ānanda. I am not sinking. But although I have long waited upon the teacher and bhikkhus worthy of esteem, never before have I seen such a talk on the Dhamma. Such talk on the Dhamma, householder, is not given to lay people clothed in white. Such talk on the Dhamma is given to those who have gone forth." The reason Sariputta says this is because the household life is related to the pursuit and acquisition of things. People get troubled by that, and their mind is not ripe to experience such talk. It's not that this is some kind of esoteric teaching. Well then, Venerable Sariputta, let such talk on the Dhamma be given to lay people clothed in white. There are clansmen with little dust in their eyes who are wasting away through not hearing such talk on the Dhamma. There will be those who will understand the Dhamma. Then after giving the householder Anathapindika this advice, the Venerable Sariputta and the Venerable Ānanda rose from their seats and departed. Soon after they had left, the householder Anathapindika died and reappeared in the Tusita heaven. Then, when the night was well advanced, Anathapindika, now a young god of beautiful appearance, went to the Blessed One, illuminating the whole of Jeta's grove. After paying homage to the Blessed One, he stood at one side and addressed the Blessed One in stanzas. "O blessed is this Jeta's grove, dwelt in by the sagely Sangha, wherein resides the King of Dhamma, the fount of all my happiness. By action, knowledge, and Dhamma, by virtue and noble way of life, by these are beings purified, not by lineage or wealth. By action, mental, verbal, physical action, through knowledge and the Dhamma, through sila, that is, keeping one's precepts, and the noble way of life, the Eightfold Path, are beings purified. Therefore, a wise person who sees what truly leads to his own good should investigate the Dhamma." What does it mean to investigate? To be aware, to be present. Be present and allow things to unfold, and then the insights will arise. And purify himself with it. Sariputta has reached the peak in virtue, that is sila, in peace, in samadhi, and wisdom's ways, in panya. Any bhikkhu who has gone beyond at best can only equal him. That is what the young god Anathapindika said, and the teacher approved. Then the young god Anathapindika, thinking, "The teacher has approved of me," paid homage to the Blessed One, and keeping him on his right, he vanished at once. When the night had ended, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus thus: "Bhikkhus, last night, when the night was well advanced, there came to me a certain god of beautiful appearance who illuminated the whole of Jeta's grove. After paying homage to me, he sat down at one side and addressed me in stanzas thus: O blessed is this Jeta's grove, dwelt in by the sagely Sangha, wherein resides the King of Dhamma, the fount of all my happiness. By action, knowledge, and Dhamma, by virtue and noble way of life, by these are beings purified, not by lineage or wealth. Therefore, a wise person who sees what truly leads to his own good should investigate the Dhamma and purify himself with it." Sariputta has reached the peak in virtue, peace, and wisdom's ways. Any bhikkhu who has gone beyond at best can only equal him. That is what the young god said. Then the young god, thinking the teacher has approved of me, paid homage to me, and keeping me on his right, he vanished at once. When this was said, the Venerable Ānanda said to the Blessed One, "Surely, Venerable Sir, the young god must have been Anathapindika." For the householder Anathapindika had perfect confidence in the Venerable Sariputta. In other words, Anathapindika was a stream enterer. And when he passed, he experienced another level. Good, good, Ānanda. As far as reasoning goes, you have drawn the right conclusion. That young god was Anathapindika, no one else. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Ānanda was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So what Sariputta is doing here is he was leading Anathapindika from the conditioned to the unconditioned. He was leading Anathapindika to an experience where his mind detaches from all experience, which is conditioned, and coming to the experience of Nibbana. This is a very powerful sutta to give to those who are dying. So if you encounter people who are on their deathbed, even if they're not introduced to the Dhamma, if you just read this sutta in the way that it has been read, their mind will experience great peace. And it can happen that their mind might even experience Nibbana before they depart. And the reason why I say that this process leads to Nibbana is because there is a sutta similar to this one, which I will read now. And this is from Anguttara Nikaya 10.6. Then the Venerable Ānanda approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side, and said to him, "Bhante, could a bhikkhu obtain such a state of mind that he would not be percipient of earth in relation to earth, of water in relation to water, of fire in relation to fire, of air in relation to air, of the base of infinite of space in relation to the base of infinite space, of the base of infinite consciousness in relation to the base of infinite consciousness, of the base of nothingness in relation to the base of nothingness, of the base of neither perception nor non-perception in relation to the base of neither perception nor non-perception, of this world in relation to this world, of the other world in relation to the other world, but he would still be percipient." So when he says this, for example, of the base of nothingness in relation to the base of nothing, of these things in relation to these things, he's talking about, is there a state of mind where the mind just sees things as they actually are, doesn't add anything to the perception, just sees things as they are. Doesn't say, this is me, this is mine, this is myself. Doesn't conceive of a self in relation to these experiences. He could, Ānanda. But how, Bhante, could he obtain such a state of mind? Here, Ānanda, a bhikkhu is percipient thus. This is peaceful. This is sublime. That is the stilling of all activities, the relinquishing of all acquisitions, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. This is how mind is liberated. So we can take a break here, and if anyone has any questions, we can answer a few questions and I'll get to the next sutta. I can't hear you. You wanna do questions later? Yeah, good. Yeah. That is a very good question, and I'm not familiar with how it became a stream mentor. Is anybody familiar with that? How Anathapindika became a stream mentor? Yeah. But was it through hearing or was it through meditation? Through hearing.
It was a very devout.
Huh? Yeah, because the mind becomes very calm, very collected, and then is able to apprehend the Dhamma.
He was one of the ones that the stock kind of formula that applied you find mostly in the Vinaya, and the Buddha talk, like it delivered talks to a big audience or very specific important people, like Anathapindika. That's where we find that he delivers a talk, a graduated talk. He begins with generosity, recollecting the devas, virtues, all these beautiful qualities, and reminds his audience. Usually these talks will be fairly long. So, because this is the way it was done at that time. There's no other entertainment really. It's music and people. And then their minds would be uplifted, and their minds would be clear and bright, and like a white piece of cloth, ready to take in the bag. And then the Buddha would deliver the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. And then they would see the Dhamma, the Chakti, the vision of the Dhamma, the horizon. And then I believe that's how Anathapindika got the stream into it. But he was a very busy, very wealthy merchant. He was very devout. So he was doing a lot. So he didn't have much time for meditation. Even his daughter was more advanced than him. Because on her deathbed, she called him, her father, her little son, her little brother, because she understood more than him. So she had sympathy for him. So that's... Yes, that helps, of course, but it's not everything. Yeah, one can decide also. One can decide to dislike having to do this, and then it's more likely to happen. But yes, of course, all the Buddha's disciples, just to be reborn in an era where there's a Buddha, is, you need to have done something pretty good. It's like, and just everybody here, I mean, there are so many more eons of this universe that occur without any kind of Dhamma teaching, without a Buddha. This is a very small universe of time. Everybody here has done very good deeds. Have very good paramis, basically. So, is the arising of the condition? Well, yeah, everything is conditioned to the point where it would develop the qualities for awakening for so many lifetimes. The only thing that is not conditioned is Nibbana. Although we attain it through conditioned means. So that's always the tricky part to understand. But yes, of course, the arising of the Buddha is conditioned. He has to develop, like you do, like everybody here is doing. But for him, every Buddha takes a longer time, and finally break through without a teacher. Personally, I don't understand how it's even possible. But Buddhas do that, so that's amazing.
Wonderful. Because your mind is like calm and relaxed.
Sometimes reading the Chachaka Sutta that was read last night, and reading this sutta also, but I've only seen happen when reading the Chachaka Sutta. People actually have an Nirodha experience sometimes. They will actually let go of everything so much, so deeply. You know, listening to Dhamma and having very profound experience is still possible in this day and age. It's not gone. And I've seen it in audiences and people who were just let go of everything. And so just listening to the Dhamma, they've experienced so the discourses are quite important. And that was a great version actually. As I looked at you, you were barely reading this thing. Came from him.
Shall we go on to the next sutta? Go ahead.
Impermanence of consciousness versus consciousness as its delivery of clarity.
Consciousness as the...
Sixth element. That is sixth
When we talk about the consciousness as the sixth element, it's referring to mind. In other words, mind is known by its faculties through contact, feeling, perception, intention, and attention. Each of these is dependent upon causes and conditions. For contact to arise, it needs the six sense bases. For feeling to arise, it needs contact. For perception and intention to arise, it also needs contact. And for attention to arise, it requires contact as well. So consciousness here as the sixth element is also dependent upon the factors of nama rupa. That's why if it's dependent upon something, if that cause or condition changes or goes away, so too does that consciousness.
Because it will not finish. Consciousness.
It will pass away. If you take, your eye consciousness, any of the consciousnesses that arise.
Arise and pass.
Arise and pass, yes.
So it will perish. It will perish also.
It will perish.
Perish.
Yes.
For myself.
Yes.
But as a consciousness, it is like an element. It will change the form.
It will, yes, it changes dependent upon name and form.
As an element.
Yeah.
For me, if I take myself, mind, and other things, it is the impermanent.
Yes. But even the consciousness element is only experienced through mind. If there was no mind, there would be no consciousness. And if there's no consciousness, there will be no mind. Vijnana ceases. They all cease. They all cease. What happens is when there is a cessation, when there's a dissolution of that life, the craving that is rooted in the formations, the sankharas, gives rise to a new consciousness. This is known as the evolving consciousness that then goes into the next life. And it continues to arise and pass away, dependent upon causes and conditions in that existence. I'm sorry?
It gives rise to a new vijnana.
Correct, new vijnana.
Which may not be reborn in a pain because they sometimes say that life between lives or not get sees here but not get reborn.
Yeah, I've heard of this also. This is actually, if you talk about, like, for example, an anagami who experiences parinibbana, it says in the intermediate they experience parinibbana. But that assumes that there is an existence between two existences. Yeah. But what happens is, prior to it actually fully perishing, it experiences liberation right there and then becomes cool or enters parinibbana.
So after that, there's only vijnana. There is no sannyana, sankara.
No, there is vijnana for a short span, like that. So this is what is also known as spontaneously generated. That is, there's no consciousness waiting somewhere to take birth in a new Namarupa. It happens spontaneously or quickly.
So if Sankara ceases here, how does the newborn child carry the qualities for the previous life?
So the consciousness becomes a carrier.
There is an element of Sankara in that consciousness.
Right. It moves forward those sankharas into a new Namarupa. In the same way, in one life, when we experience this one life, it's not like when the sankharas arise, consciousness arises. The sankharas' momentum is felt through each of the links of dependent origination. So they are like, as they arise, the impression is left on the next link, and that impression is left on the next link, and that next link is left on the next link. So it's like there's momentum that continues on. Huh? What chitta? Javana chitta. Oh, that's Abhidhamma.
That is how the result of past karma.
Yes.
Previous life carries to the new life.
Right.
With the momentum of the sankara.
Yes. And the momentum of the sankharas is through the fuel of craving. In other words, if the formations have craving, conceit, aversion, whatever it might be, in relation to what is being experienced in the mind, then that is liable to cause a new consciousness that's tainted by that. And that it will incline to a new Namarupa. That's the bhava. It will incline to a new existence.
Or punya.
Of course, I mean, if it's punya, then it'll go to a wholesome, yes.
I don't think anyone is clearly a bad person or a clearly a
Right, exactly. Yeah. That is why the Buddha talks about karma in that way. Some karma will activate at certain times or certain lives, let's say. And some karma will maybe just remain dormant because the causes and conditions are not present for that nutrification, for the nourishment of that karma to sprout.
Seeds are there.
Seeds will still be there until they can't sprout again.
So the seeds of the sankharas will travel in the punya.
Yes.
Here, the role of Gandhava.
The Gandhava is the evolving consciousness. That's all it is. It's just the consciousness coming from one to the next. You know, there is that simile of using two candles. You have one candle and you light the flame of that candle. Then you light the next candle with the previous flame. What has happened actually? Is that new flame, or is that flame new? Is it a new flame, or is it arising dependent on the previous flame? So the previous flame is dependent upon its particular candle wax, which is the 5 aggregates, the craving, and so on. But the energy, the momentum of that is transferred into this flame. But that flame carries forward dependent upon the previous flame, and then continues arising or flickering based on the new fuel, the new Namarupa, the new set of 5 aggregates.
Right. So
human, we will bring our seeds also with us.
Yes.
It's light.
Yes.
It's a flame.
Yes.
Right? So in a way, we need some evidence of the previous candle wax to the new candle.
Right. The potential of that to continue.
This ties very well with the concept of therapy. They say that a previous life can activate any time during your current life.
Right. Yes.
You have no control on that. The conditions have to be ready, the right, and then the previous life activate.
And as we'll see tomorrow, contact is the key for that. There has to be contact for the stimulation of that to happen.
So again, phassa.
Phassa.
Yeah, the intermediate stage. That is what actually mind
Yeah.
feel. And in the other steps or here, immediately conceiving is not there.
This is what I'll explain when you talk about the antarabhava, the intermediate stage. Now, this is nowhere in the suttas, so take it for what it's worth. This is my own experience and my own understanding of this process. When there is the dying process happening, certain things are unraveling. The six sense bases unravel in a certain order. The elements of the body unravel in a certain order. But the last to unravel is the mind, is the consciousness element. So even if the body is considered clinically dead, mind is still active. That is why they have that concept of bardos. It's not some intermediate existence. It's all happening in mind itself. And through that process, there can arise desire, there can arise aversion, there can arise identification. When that happens and the mind latches onto that, says that this is me, this is mine, this is myself, then the formations will activate a certain kind of consciousness. Then that will depart from the mind, and then that will be the dissolution of the mind base. Even well beyond after the body is seemingly medically considered dead.
I think it's a good thing to remember that Sankara Paccaya Vijnana. So that we tend to, even though we say this, that formations engender consciousness, basically. Yet we still have a really hard time understanding this because it's hard to understand unless someone would experience very profound Dhamma. We tend to really see it the other way around, where the sankharas are kind of planted in consciousness, but that's not the way it works. It's actually really sankhara. Actually, sankhara also can be translated as activities or processes that are continually happening. And it's not that sankharas are planted in consciousness and that is like kind of moving on to the next thing. It's actually consciousness is made up of sankharas. There's nothing. Consciousness is just an illusion. It's a mirage. Yes, it's a mirage. It's just something that is. It's like a screen, and sankhara is the pixels. So there's no screen really. There's no image. It's just pixels.
Sankharas are the?
Catalyst.
Right. They're the catalyst, yes.
The what?
The catalyst.
The catalyst.
Activating the layers.
And when people start to enter the still mind, for example, the quiet mind, it starts at the plane of endless consciousness. We start to see a kind of a flickering of consciousness. People will start to see that, or just becoming aware of the transience of mind. Basically, that mind is very impermanent and it's just coming up with all this stuff. And that stills out becomes more subtle and becomes very still. That's what we call the clear mind, the still mind, the quiet mind. But the activities, they're not gone. They're just much more subtle. And mind is, even still mind, is still fully fabricated. Even though it's hard to see, and this is a place where everybody, it's hard to let go of that sometimes, because we really do attach with that sense of awareness. That's the last bastion of I-ness. And we really think this is me. Because, this is everything. Everything falls into this thing. Everything that I do, everything that I see, everything that I perceive falls into this, at least this, this I. This I'm there. And even saying I is too coarse for it, because this is so subtle, so pure. And that's the genius of the Buddha, because from what I understand, other teachers at this time figured that out too. That this was pretty profound state to be in, but he went beyond that. He actually even understood that this was fabricated. And even still mind, clear mind, is fabricated from previous bhava, from previous conceit, from previous me, my mind. And now at this point it's temporary liberation. At this point someone has cleansed their mind of all temporary accumulated activities that would be coarser, and they have this clear, still mind. But even that consciousness is fully fabricated. It is, and that's another way we can call sankhara, is fabrications. And without fabrications, it doesn't even exist, it doesn't arise. And that's where people will understand, if sankhara, sabba sankhara samito, if all sankharas are completely relinquished, then consciousness just vaporizes. And it's so that also helps understand the transition process, where the sankharas are actually pushing it according to the momentum that bhava gave before, because bhava and sankhara are very intertwined. That sense of I-ness, and that sense of, I really like these and these and these things, so mind will be projected in an existence that has all these things. But really it's not. Really, consciousness is just these activities are just being pushed towards the right causes and conditions. And that's a very fundamental understanding to access Nirodha or Nibbana, because then one can actually remove the source completely, or tranquilize the source completely.
So also the other thing about bhava, just to add to that with what you just said, was the Buddha actually gave an interesting image of this whole process of bhava, of the new inclination into a new life. He said that karma is the field and consciousness is the seed and craving is the moisture. So even when we talk about the four nutriments, there it says they are dependent upon craving. You remove craving of all kinds. Craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for non-existence, aversion, identification, conceit. If there was not any of that, could that consciousness grow? Could that consciousness continue? No. Using that analogy of that, if the nutrition of the moisture of the craving is not provided to that seed, then it won't incline, it won't grow. So paying attention to where the mind is. Does the mind have craving, or is the mind without craving?
Another shameless plug.
Another shameless plug. But if the mind is without any craving, the idea of a new existence doesn't follow. Right there and then rebirth is destroyed.
In rare cases, after declaring to let everything in the world, sometimes we have to get
Yes.
It is craving for the whole body.
You could say that, but what's going on is the mind is actually still active. It's not dead. Mind is still there. Until the mind is completely gone, then you can't say there is a dissolution of the aggregates. So this is where people experience near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences and things like that.
That's why they try to destroy the
Yeah, different traditions will keep the body for a little bit, or some will just destroy it right there and then. Like in the, I think predominantly Vedic tradition, the idea is to burn the body so that, the next existence is followed through, if there is going to be next existence. In other traditions, they keep the body for a little while because they're saying the mind is still unraveling and so on and so forth.
I have a question with reference to what Bhante said, with reference to perhaps past karma arising, even though my understanding from Bhante is when you sit down and you actually meditate and pull out forgiveness and you get to these stages where you might enter into Suttavada, you might go a little further. Let's say you go all the way to Armstrong. You've already released all this karma. In this process, is there a possibility of all karma arising again?
So the way to look at that is certain karma will still arise. This process is not actually only the eradication of karma. So what is karma? Karma, we know, is actions, intentional, mental, verbal, physical actions. Karma is intention. You are purifying your intentions so that potential karma would not arise. But just like karma, just like everything else has a momentum when it's released, and I don't mean release in terms of letting go. I'm talking about when the arrow has been released, that karma still has a momentum. That's why even for arahats like Moggallana and Angulimala, they experience the karmic repercussions of their previous actions, even lifetimes, many lifetimes before that particular lifetime. And the fuel or the stimulus for that is the phassa, is the contact. But the difference is, if that karma arises again, dependent upon the right causes and conditions, if one is an arahat, then that karma is not added to through further reactions, further craving, but diminishes and ceases right there and then. All right, let's continue to the next sutta. This is Samyutta Nikaya 3595, Malunkhya Putta. Then the Venerable Malunkhya Putta approached the Blessed One and said to him, "Venerable Sir, it would be good if the Blessed One would teach me the Dhamma in brief, so that having heard the Dhamma from the Blessed One, I might dwell alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent, and resolute." Hear now, Malunkhya Putta, what should I say to the young bhikkhus when a bhikkhu like you, old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, come to the last stage, asks me for an exhortation in brief? Although, Venerable Sir, I am old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, come to the last stage, let the Blessed One teach me the Dhamma in brief. Let the fortunate one teach me the Dhamma in brief. Perhaps I may understand the meaning of the Blessed One's words. Perhaps I may become an heir to the Blessed One's words. What do you think, Malunkhya Putta? do you have any, this is a very important question, listen. Do you have any desire, lust, or affection for those forms cognizable by the eye that you have not seen and never seen before, that you do not see and would not think might be seen? In other words, could craving arise for an object that was never before experienced? It's not possible. You need feeling, you need the experience of that object for the potential of craving to arise. Right, but in this case we're just saying, in this moment, if you had never seen any of that, whatever that object was, you had no conception also of what that object was, there is no potential for craving to arise.
But the child who enters puberty, he sees lust for the first time.
Right, but he experiences the object. If he didn't experience the object, he would not experience the lust. So in other words, feeling is a condition for craving to arise.
So he's never experienced lust before.
No, he's never experienced the object before. So the I and the form have not met to give rise to contact. And if there's no contact with that, there's no experience, no feeling. So if there's no feeling, there's no potential for craving to arise.
As soon as the lust happens, then
There's a potential for craving to arise, dependent upon that feeling.
that's why so much is spoken about the
Yes. Yes. And so the answer is no, Venerable Sir. Likewise, do you have any desire, lust, or affection for those sounds, odors, tastes, tactile objects, mental phenomena that you have not cognized and never cognized before, that you do not cognize and would not think might be cognized? Now, I will grant you what you just said. If somebody has experienced it before, the memory of that remains. So it might not be experienced in that moment, but if there's a thought about that, there is a potential for craving to arise, because there's the mental phenomena of that previous experience. But if there's not been any previous experience, to say of any contact to arise with that object, then the potential for craving can't arise. That doesn't mean that, so that's one thing. There can be underlying tendencies towards craving. That's why an infant, this is what, actually, the Buddha said this to the same person, Malunkyaputta, in a previous sutta, which is sutta number 64 from Majjhima Nikaya. He tells him, if you're going to say that there's not going to be any craving when there is no contact and feeling, what about an infant? They still have the seeds of craving through the underlying tendencies. So they still have the potential to grasp at things. That potential is still there. But right now, in terms of the experience, if there's no contact, there cannot be any feeling, and there cannot be any craving that can arise.
Thus, whatever happens is because of the previous sankhara.
Yes. That contact is dependent upon the momentum of the sankharas going through consciousness, nama rupa, six sense bases.
But for someone who has been celibate for several lifetimes, that may not happen.
That may not happen, because now those sankharas might have been replaced by sankharas with no lust. So sankharas, that's the beautiful thing about sankharas, is that they change all the time. And they can be changed all the time.
They're not villains.
Yeah, they're not villains. Yes, exactly. Exactly. You're rooting out the unwholesome, and then you're installing the wholesome. But then you have to root out the identification with the wholesome also. Yeah. Yeah. So likewise, he says, no, Venerable Sir, here, Malunkyaputta, regarding things seen, heard, sensed, and cognized by you, In the seen, there will be merely the seen. In the heard, there will be merely the heard. In the sensed, there will be merely the sensed. In the cognized, there will be merely the cognized. When Malunke Putta, regarding things seen, heard, sensed, and cognized by you, in the seen there will be merely the seen, in the heard there will be merely the heard, in the sense there will be merely the sensed, in the cognized there will be merely the cognized. Then Malunke Putta, you will not be by that. When Malunke Putta, you are not by that, then you will not be therein. When you are not therein, then you will not be neither here, you will be neither here, nor beyond, nor in between the two. This itself is the end of suffering. There is a lot to unpack in that. Let's go bit by bit what this is actually saying. First he says, regarding things seen, heard, sensed, cognized by you. Seen and heard, that's the sixth sense basis. Cognized, thought about, right? Contemplated upon. In the seen, there will be merely the seen. In the heard, there will be merely the heard. In the sense, there will be merely the sensed. In the cognized, there will be merely the cognized. This word merely the sensed, merely the cognized, merely the heard, merely the seen. Merely means only that. There is only an experience, and that's it. So right now, when you're hearing my voice and you're seeing all of us, what is going on in your mind? Is it merely just seeing and hearing? Or is it adding a whole momentum of ideas in relation to what is being seen and heard? Is there papancha in relation to what is being seen and heard or contemplated? If you just have mindfulness, pure, unadulterated mindfulness, then there will be only the seen, only the heard, only the cognized. That's it. So then he says, regarding these things, in the seen there will be merely the seen, in the heard there will be merely the heard, in the sense there will be merely the sensed, in the cognized there will be merely the cognized. Then you will not be by that. There will not be a self, a sense of self that arises dependent upon that experience. How does that sense of self arise dependent upon that experience? How would it arise? Come on, guys, I can't do all the work here. Huh? How does the sense of self arise independent upon that feeling? I am seeing, I am doing, I am meditating, I am. Adding a sense of self arises from conceit, the I-making, the my-making. In other language, ahamkara, that which adds a sense of self to everything. How does that arise? Clinging has to be there. But how does that potential for the arising of I-making, my-making arise? Sankharas, which are rooted in conceit. But how does that conceit arise? That's a very right answer. It's a right answer. But what specific cause and condition gives rise to the conceit? There is a contact that arises, then the contact gives rise to the feeling. But what happens at the level of feeling that causes the mind to say that this is me, this is mine, this is myself? Lack of mindfulness. Lack of mindfulness is one of the things. What else? Avidya is another thing. What else? In that moment, what happens? Before the desire happens, before the tanha happens. So contact, feeling, and craving, right? What happens between the feeling and the craving that causes the mind to identify with that feeling? Perception is tied to the feeling. What causes the mind to take the perception as me, mine, myself? Right, so that means lack of mindfulness, sati and sampaññāna. That's one aspect of it. Some kind of identification, but where does that, what is identifying?
Maybe the vibration, sensation.
There is an image that the mind carries about itself. This is conceit. We talked about the types of conceit. There is, when there's a feeling that arises, there is the potential for certain underlying tendencies to arise. Remember the 7 anusayas, the 7 underlying tendencies? Underlying tendency towards craving, towards aversion, towards ignorance, towards conceit, towards desire for being, towards doubt, and towards views. One of those things is conceit, the underlying tendency towards conceit. So there is a self-image that's there constantly, which compares how does this feeling arise, and when this feeling arises, how does it affect that self-image? Take away the self-image, and there is then just the seeing. But the superimposition of that self through that image that you have, the mind has about itself. What is that self-image? I am a person, I am a teacher, I am a woman, I am a man, right? I am of this particular political affiliation, I'm a Buddhist, I'm an Indian, I'm an American, I'm a Canadian. So all of these different elements create this sense of self. And depending upon the experience, the contact with which gives rise to the feeling, rise to the experience, there is always that constant judging, judging, comparing, how does that affect me? How does that affect me as an identity?
Would you say that's a sensation or an image, or how does that show up?
It's an identity view. It's a view you have about an idea of a self. It can be a thought, just a thought. So the adding of that thought to the experience, then the craving arises, then the aversion arises. Otherwise, if there was no concept, conceit, no comparison of how this affects that self-image, then there would be no one to crave. There would be no one to have aversion. There would be no pleasant feeling that affects a me in a certain way. A painful feeling that affects a me a certain way. A neutral feeling that affects me a certain way. So that image of me, that is what then creates this idea that I have to grasp it or I have to push it away. I think we should. Figure out who are you.
I think I'm just trying to digest this, because in this mind, it feels like this very craving is I. Not I gives rise to craving, which is usually the way we see it. But it feels like when craving arises, that gives rise to identity.
But even before the craving arises, the craving then brings up or sheds light on that sense of an I.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
The anusayas, there's a momentum that I is like, because some of it is so kind of subtle that it's not like you're gonna think there's an I behind, but it's just such a...
And it's like it happens concurrently, or almost concurrently. It's not like one necessarily precedes or follows the next, but it's all happening sometimes in tandem.
Yes.
But if you really have this sharp clarity of mind, in general I'm saying, if anybody has that sharp clarity of mind, they can immediately catch the sense of I coming up and then let go, and just let the experience be the experience. Let the seen be merely the seen. Let the heard be merely the heard. Let the cognized be merely the cognized. So then he says,
As a student, I am sitting and pursuing. If I am doing jhana, I will not catch it. Let it go like that, I will not be in a position to go to that level. So there I am not interested.
you're not interested in?
Now it is open and I am sitting here.
Yeah.
Identity is coming and jhana, let it go.
Let go of the jhana.
If I am in the jhana,
Yeah.
I will not question you or anything. I will not come in that particular thing.
You're saying I won't come in jhana?
That's what I feel when you are speaking like this. Before getting identified myself with the aspect, whatever spoken word.
Okay, you say there's no I in, you're saying that,
Temporary nirvana or something it is.
well, the jhana is a temporary liberation, right? But you're saying there's no I in jhana.
Action is there, but I will not go to the feeling that's there.
So what I'm trying to get at about that also, that since you bring this up, is that in the meditation there is only the meditation. If there's no you in the meditation, no you before the meditation, no you after the meditation, then just that is the end of suffering. Just let the meditation be.
That's the fourth Satipatthana.
Yes.
Dhamma as Dhamma. When you sit down, have gladness, joy, relaxing, body goes up, jhana happens. It's not you.
Yeah.
That's the nature of mind. That's how mind works. It's not you. Same for the five aggregates. Same for all the Four Noble Truths.
Even the hindrances.
Even the hindrances. It's just Dhamma. That's why it's the last one. To see all the principles of nature in action and develop them to reach the unconditioned. But you also, when you sit down to meditate, you you actually should train to see it as the fourth Satipatthana. You're sitting down, applying some principles that will uplift your mind into liberation. But that's not you, it's just principles.
And to add to that point, you could just sit there and allow the causes and conditions to be there for the jhana. In other words, if your mind is free of hindrances, it experiences naturally that relief. Allow that relief then to turn into joy. Allow that joy then to turn into sukha and tranquility. So this is what is meant by just observing, just watching things as they are.
Even while speaking also, I should experience the speak.
In the speaking, there is only the speaking. There is no speaker.
By virtue of the intellect or anything, I am speaking. So,
See, that's the thing, right?
experience and speak.
Speaking is a little tough though.
Speaking
It's a little harder though.
Speaking is a little harder to let go of the I in the speaking.
One person will experience speaks. That is slow motion.
Yeah. So in the speaking, there is only the speaking. There's no this or that of I am speaking, or I have to say this, or I have to say it in this way. There is just speaking. The implant of the I in relation to any activity. This is what I mean when I say experience everything fully. Experiencing everything fully means being present in that experience, allowing mind to be completely aware and fully comprehending that experience without any I in there, without any me, myself, or mine in there.
The sutta about Sādhu where he goes into one day.
Yeah. So I mean, just to that point, there is that sutta where Sariputta is coming back from his days abiding, from his practice, and he's glowing, and Ānanda says, Venerable Ānanda says, your features are bright, your faculties look clear, what is it that you're doing? And he says, I've been in the first jhana all day long. And what happens after that?
Well, that's one day, and then there's another sutta for the next day, and it's the second jhana. It's the same formula until up to
cessation.
Yeah. They never.
Yeah.
Sariputta says.
Yeah, he says there is no idea or notion that I am entering the jhana, or I am in the jhana, or I have come out of the jhana. And that's why Ānanda says to him,
must have been a long time.
No, he doesn't say that.
But it must have been a long time since the Venerable Sariputta has cultivated this.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's big. No, he says to the effect that is because there is no more conceit in the mind.
Yeah.
So jhana without conceit.
Advanced meditators, the more meditators will go further on the path, that's more what it's going to look like.
Yes.
It's going to be sitting, I think Delson says, do nothing quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's what it means. It's just that at the beginning you need instructions, you need directions, and that's really important because we want to know that you're going in the right direction, going through the right steps. But after a while, the mind will just know. It will just know what to do. It will sit down, and it will know that if it does anything, it will get in the way. So it's a matter of doing nothing, taking a step back, and if the mind inclines into seeing what's going on, it can. But most likely it won't be interested anymore because it's seen the process so many times that it just knows that's what's going on.
Yeah.
So there is no I making, there's no mind making. It's not I am entering jhana, or I am in this particular jhana, I'm coming out. Nah, it's not really interesting. Just thinking that would be too heavy.
Yeah.
So it just prefers not to think about it. So, yeah.
And the other thing is, I think as an exercise for you guys, outside of the practice and going out in daily life, have you noticed when you're listening to someone in a conversation what the mind is doing? The mind is coming up with a response to what is being said. Mind is coming up with a question that has to be asked in relation to what's being said. So in that, is there actually listening going on, or is there a process of prapancha in relation to the listening going on? So in the listening, make this a practice. In the listening, listen 100%. Full attention to what is being said. And if you catch the mind trying to come up with a response, let that go. Relax. And keep listening. So, this idea of a sense of self, this idea of me, mine, myself, happens as a result of the conceit that is ingrained, let's say. Not in the experience. The experience is as the experience is. It's how the mind interprets that experience. The mind interprets that experience as a me, mine, or myself. If you catch the mind doing this, and you let go of it and let the experience just be there, then no potential for craving can arise. No potential for clinging can arise. No potential for bhava can arise. In that moment, that a feeling arises and passes away. It dissipates. Likewise with the hindrance. The hindrance was not caused in that moment by you. It arose because of causes and conditions. But the engagement with the hindrance, as this is my hindrance, I have to do something about that hindrance, flourishes that hindrance, nourishes that hindrance. But if you see that hindrance for what it actually is, here is present a hindrance, and then let go of any reaction to that hindrance, and then gently bring that mind back to home base, back to base camp. Then the hindrance goes away. That hindrance is karma. All experience is karma, one way or the other. Either through intention, that you're actively doing something, or experiencing the consequences of. Now that experience, that old karma is to be made contact with and felt and experienced. This is what the Buddha says. Old karma is the eye, is the ear, is the nose, is the tongue, is the body, is the mind, to be made contact with and felt. And then that's it. If you just experience things in that way, then the karma dissipates. It rises again with a weaker energy. Same with the hindrance. But if there's no engagement with it, with the sense of I, it goes away. If there is, it adds further through the fuel of craving, through the fuel of clinging, through the fuel of inclining to become something, through habitual tendencies. And there is birth of new action, which just adds to that repository of karma. All right, let's continue. And so Malunke Buddha says this: I understand in detail, Venerable Sir, the meaning of what was stated by the Blessed One in brief. Having seen a form with mindfulness muddled, attending to the pleasing sign, one experiences it with infatuated mind and remains tightly holding onto it. Many feelings flourish within, originating from the visible form. Covetousness and annoyance as well, by which one's mind becomes disturbed. For one who accumulates suffering, thus Nibbana is said to be far away. Muddled mindfulness, what does that mean? Improper attention. Ayoniso manasikara. Not paying attention to the experience as an experience. Seeing permanence in that which is impermanent. Seeing happiness in that which is inherently suffering. Seeing self in that which is not me, not mine, not myself. Misapprehending the experience. That is muddled mindfulness. Based on that muddled mindfulness, you attend to that pleasing sign, which attending, meaning paying attention. Through attention, that consciousness flows to that sign, to that experience. And now the microphone has ceased. No more. The sankharas are done, are over. All right. Old school.
Buddha was said to have a voice that spread evenly in the room without going beyond its limits, but everybody could hear.
Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. Good. Attending to the pleasing sign, which means the consciousness has gone to that sign, apprehended that form, that experience. One experiences it with infatuated mind. What does that mean, infatuated mind? A mind with craving. A mind that is grasping. A mind that sees this as me, mine, myself. That is the conceit. And remains tightly holding on to it. That's the clinging. Many feelings flourish within. What does that mean? Many feelings flourish within. Within what? Within the mind. Many sankharas arise, giving rise to further thoughts, prapancha, mental proliferation, originating from that visible form. Covetousness and annoyance as well, greed and hatred, by which one's mind becomes disturbed, naturally. For one who accumulates suffering thus, in other words, suffering also is karma. One who accumulates karma thus, how does one accumulate further karma? Let's take the example of the hindrance. The hindrance arises, that is old karma to be experienced and felt. The mind looks at that and says that affects a sense of me, that I'm taking this personally, tries to push it away, or if it's a good kind of feeling, it grabs onto it. And then mental proliferation arises from that. That mental proliferation adds to that hindrance. That hindrance becomes stronger in its momentum. That hindrance flourishes. And so what are you doing? You're accumulating more suffering by doing that. And are you close to Nibbana when that happens? Not at all. So, likewise, he says, having heard a sound with mindfulness muddled, having smelt an odor with mindfulness muddled, having enjoyed a taste with mindfulness muddled, having felt a contact with mindfulness muddled, having known an object, cognized an object with mindfulness muddled, attending to that sign, taking it personally, one experiences it with a craving mind and remains holding tightly to it, clinging to it. Many feelings flourish within. Mental proliferation, prapancha, arises, originating from that object, not from the object itself, originating from taking personal that object, thinking about that object in reference to a me, mine, or myself, by which one mind, or covetousness and annoyance.
Yeah, but nowadays, the teachings have been it's so different now. So we don't have the same causes and conditions. So I mean, I've noticed that we're more interested about technology than Dhamma, and I've met many people that were more interested in Dhamma than anything else.
But I always say there's also a fifth requisite nowadays. Wi-Fi.
But yeah, by any means do I need to say that even though it sounds like I think it's such an amazing anybody that takes on the road, usually very, very wonderful.
He's there for a reason.
Oh yeah.
Structure. There has to be some structure.
Of course. Otherwise the video was not laid down just to attain Nibbana. It was laid down for the long-lasting ecstasy, which is why we're getting it now.
So we had this nature of functioning.
Yes, of course. Scenario is important. I mean, otherwise it would be chaos. Nobody would listen to each other. No, I'm right.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Something about the field digital experience on it to justify or compare with meditation, something like that. But we never experience kind of feeling we got. It's very difficult to express like and what I got meditation. But while exploring, sometimes we understand something different. So then I think it's the puzzle to me
as best as you can with the language that you can use to explain the experience. And there is certain commonalities in terms of an experience. So that commonality allows a teacher or a guide to know, okay, what he's saying here or what this person is saying here could imply that this is where they're at, and accordingly help the meditator make adjustments based on experience. So you need someone who's a competent teacher or a guide to help you guide you through those experiences. Of course, you could always go into the suttas and try to see, is it matching what's being talked about in the suttas as well. But more often than not, when you do have an experience and you go back to the suttas, you'll find that your understanding of the sutta becomes even greater because you've already experienced it, and it's just you're able to recognize, oh, this is what they're referring to, or this is what they're talking about. So there's supposed to be a level of awareness of the experience that's required, so that when you have an experience or you have something that happens new, try to write it down after you finish your meditation. Make notes of what it is that you experienced, and then tell the interviewer this is what's happening, and they will at best be able to provide you some kind of advice on what to do next.
Speaking short of the language.
Excuse me. What's that?
Speaking short of the language.
Short of the language.
He cannot express.
But there are certain words you could use. It's like this or it's like that.
It's very difficult to look as a representation short
Which is why I would suggest to everyone that when you're meditating, keep a notebook handy. And after you come out of your meditation, just take a couple of minutes to let the mind review what happened in that session. You will recollect what happened, and then you just write as best as you can what happened there.
This will be the main act.
Huh?
Writing will become the main act.
No, it shouldn't. I mean, it's just for just a few moments, It helps you to understand what's going on. Or if you have a good memory and you remember what's going on, then retain that memory and let us know. Anything else? Which what? What is that?
The disciples of do we need to take as an example?
Role models in the lay community. Visakha is one. Megara's mother, did she become a monk? There's two Visakhas, no? Chitta, yes. Yeah. I think there's a book called The Great Disciples of the Buddha. If you read that, you'll probably get some idea of some of the examples of lay students that are good examples.
Like Bhante says, we usually would point out the lay anagamis, whether it was Chitta, the man who was in Uja was the
I think there's a question like this in almost every retreat.
I bet.
There are examples of lay disciples becoming arhats. In the Vinaya, for example, there's Yasa. Maybe a handful, right? Maybe even just two or three.
3 or 4.
Yeah.
But what happens is they usually they would become arahants right beside the Buddha, and then they would ask for Rupa Sampradaya.
So they would go forth, yeah.
Yeah, so technically there was no walking around really arahant. But yeah, if you look at the causes and conditions, it's like the Buddha was there, ordaining was really easy. Now it's not that easy. Like I'm from Canada, ordaining is not easy at all. So if I'm not saying but if someone were to be an arahant in a Western country, for example, it would be hard to ordain. Then there's a whole question about, you would need to find a place to do it that would suit what your practice is. If you go somewhere that you're not really interested in, for example, how Buddhism has become in that particular monastery, then why would you do that? So then that even blocks way more options, which are already few. There seems to be that there would be a tendency for a lay arahant to be very disenchanted with lay life and to see going forth as extremely natural. But we don't know about that.
We'll let you know when that happens. Yeah.
And then we'll support the causes and conditions for this to happen.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that there's no real clear, there's nowhere in the text where we can find that it doesn't exist. And there's nowhere in the text that would seem to give any kind of clues that an arahant would want to be a lay person anyways. That it would make sense. So,
there is a sutta called Tevija, I think, right? The Tevija Sutta or something, which is in Majjhima Nikayam. It's in the 70s, somewhere in the 70s. And there the Buddha says that it would be impossible for one to become an arhat if the fetters of householdership are still present in their mind. Now, the fetters of householdership, what does that mean? And it could be interpreted as meaning they have been completely disenchanted with lay life, therefore they go forth and become bhikkhus or bhikkhunis. But the fetters of householdership means that there is still an inclination to follow a householder's life. Meaning, still an interest in earning income, still an interest in maintaining a family, still an interest in doing all of these things that are normal for the household life. So a broader perspective would be that if there was a person who was technically a lay person who became an arahant, they would be completely uninterested in maintaining a family, having an income, paying their taxes.
I think nobody has.
But they would have an inclination to be more like a monk, let's say, more like a wanderer, more like someone who is dependent upon others rather than trying to make something for themselves. So, yeah.
I think one of the best examples or proofs that we have is when the Buddha is explaining at the very beginning of the Patimokkha, the Bhikkhu Vibhaga, the Vinaya, where he is explaining, like I said the other day, basically he's explaining it's Mahamoggallana Bhante or Sariputta Bhante asking what about how long did the previous sasanas, the dispensations of the previous Buddhas lasted, and why some lasted for long and why some lasted for very short periods of time? And he answered that basically the Buddhas that taught the Dhamma but not the Vinaya didn't lay down the Patimokkha for the monks and didn't lay down the Vinaya. Their dispensation, their sasana, lasted very short because the teaching just wasn't bound by anything and they just disappeared. Even though some Buddhas would teach very eerie places, scary places, deliver very profound discourses and very quick awakenings. Even though they did that, not many people could reach out. Not because it was scary, it was far away in the forest, and it was very difficult Dhamma. And they wouldn't lay down the Vinaya or anything, and then it didn't have such an impact. And it would be just like almost like a solitary Buddha who breaks through to full awakening by himself, but doesn't know how to teach it. Then the Buddhas that actually laid down the Vinaya and laid down the Patimokkha, their sasana went for a long time and helped a lot of people. And that, de facto, that means that if there's no Vinaya, if there's no Patimokkha, even if someone's wearing a robe,
there's no real...
what's the difference?
Yeah.
So maybe someone goes forth, but if there's no Vinaya to do whatever, then it's good. So then very quickly, since there's no rules, there's no binding process, then it just...
The structure falls apart, yeah.
Goes their different ways and there's nothing.
Also, there is an example, of course, granted, Bahaya, in the Bahaya Sutta, he's technically a wanderer. Don't know if he's actually like a samanera or a monk, but he's just a wanderer, maybe an ascetic or something. And then he goes to the Buddha, and then he gets that short discourse. And then, this is why I tell you, if you become an arahat, look both ways. Because he walks and he gets gored by a bull. So then when his body is gone and everything, they ask him, what should we do and where is Maya? And the Buddha said he became one of the arahats. He is of our clan in that sense. Even though technically he didn't go forth or take refuge in the Buddha afterwards. But regardless, again, he was already living a lifestyle that was conducive, like you would live a lifestyle of a bhikkhu or a monk.
But it's interesting, he didn't take refuge.
He didn't. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Right. Right. So, but the external aspect of it didn't actually happen.
But that's the flip side of, it's either like, is it possible for a layperson to become an arahant? And it's either they would actually go forth right there and then, or they would die.
Right.
So I didn't mention the other one.
Right.
But it's kind of known that they would die within 7 days. That's what the tradition says, something like that. Again, the 7-day thing, we don't know. We just have examples of these people like Bahiya dying, and another one of
Yeah, yeah.
He's now ready to be the guy or to become now. Then if I say I don't want to die, then become a magnanimous. So it's like the case indicating that either die within 7 days or like that. So life
Yeah.
this schema is the most nice. Short experiment, she was able to realize yes, when we explain.
Isn't it Pukosati? Pukosati also, who meets the Buddha and
Sādhu already in the monk.
yes. Well, he didn't have his robe and bow.
He actually was having that, but not
Right.
Yes, yes.
going through the
Buddha asked the how to go his robe, and he said no, just go get it, and then he got yes.
Yeah, we just like it's just become this small little discussion now. So, no, the discussion is: can there be a lay arhat? And if there are lay arhats, what happens? They have to become a member of the Bhikkhu Sangha and so on. So we're just discussing different examples of all of that. Who became a stream enterer? You said a drunkard. Oh yeah. Well,
At the time of death.
he took refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and at the time of death, he took refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and
He undertook a training.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I don't know much about this, but my understanding was that it was years before they really put down the and that when you saw it go around the question and that's the question of the Buddha, that they were saying, I need to get things. And it was after some time that the Sangha got the wires of finding the answer.
I guess the Vinaya was developed concurrently to the time of the Buddha, right?
Yeah.
But it happened much later, or did it happen?
this time Sādhu insisted to take these rules strictly but with the refuse. Buddha said he knows the time when to establish rules. So they do the kind of incident happened with the refuse behind the rules.
At the beginning, it was only arahants and noble people, so there was no need for rules within the Sangha. But it was much later then people started also making mistakes, ordaining with less of an attainment, being much more new to this whole thing. And the more it progressed, the more it was more like people ordaining. When the Sangha was very famous, it was known as being very wealthy, just wearing like really good robes, having 3 really good robes and a bowl and being fed every day is at that time, for very poor people, even today, I mean, people would definitely want to ordain just to get fed and get really nice robes, you know. So, and then, and it still happens today.
And the respect.
And the respect, you know, and that's not even talking about the respect that comes with it. So, the more it happened, the more people ordained for the wrong reasons. So to protect the Sangha, these rules are put down, and so gradually they became implemented. Like Bhante was saying, the Buddha would always wait for the right moment when somebody would do something that was like obviously, okay, we need to do something about this. Then he would, but not without any reason.
Yeah.
I have a question about this. To have a cessation, it means that we have to nurture disenchantment. It's possible. It means that samadhi, samatha, and vipassana come together.
Yes.
But with other type of samadhi, like long chance,
As what?
long chance. It's very famous meditation technique in Mahayana Tibetan. It's learned for Lama and
Oh, Dzogchen.
Dzogchen.
Yeah.
Dzogchen. In the Dzogchen, with the right understanding of yoga, fostering the best disenchantment and vipassana. Can it be like that? Or only this type of samadhi, only this jhana type of samadhi can foster disenchantment and vipassana?
So that's becoming quite speculative. You know, that's the thing. We're going to have to ask somebody who's done Dzogchen and then ask them to do some vipassana along with that and see what happens.
So it means you have to take it with experience.
Yes. Okay, good. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.